Welcome back to the Rick Sullivan Show on WIZM 92.3 FM, 106.7 FM. Amy Barrio is the comms director at Clean Wisconsin. We're going to talk about data centers now and the impact data centers might have on Wisconsin. I think maybe that's a good way of putting it, right, Amy?
Yeah. What we're seeing kind of happen here in Wisconsin as data centers start getting built here. Yeah.
Okay, I want to do two things before we do that. So Clean Wisconsin is a group out of Wisconsin, obviously. And you cover a whole bunch of different things. But what I thought was very interesting about your website is under the what we do and under initiatives, it says our water. You can click on all these: our water, our air, our climate, our land, our health. And I thought was really funny about that because you cover a bunch of different things in Wisconsin that have to do with water, air, land, climate, health. And I think data centers maybe hits all of those.
It does. That's why we're so busy talking about data centers all the time. It really does hit all of those.
So we're not going to get into maybe we would, maybe we wouldn't get into what the expectations of our federal or state leaders would be. But I will just say with the La Crosse County passed the data center moratorium 18 months. And a week before that, La Crosse County passed the data center study committee. And maybe, Amy, maybe you guys can get into one of the meetings with the study committee and use your expertise about what data centers do to impact Wisconsin. But are you seeing that a lot? Do you hear this a lot? Counties and municipalities trying to do moratoriums just to put things on hold so we can figure out what's going on.
Yeah, absolutely. We're seeing an avalanche of AI data center moratoriums really all across the state. And that's great. That's something that Clean Wisconsin has been calling for since last fall, because we started to see that with these right now, only a handful of projects, just really 3 data centers, that AI data centers that are either completed or currently under construction in Wisconsin. We're starting to see real harms happening. And so there needs to be kind of a minute to understand the scale of impact of AI data centers in our state. I think an eye-opening bit of information that just came out last week was the Public Service Commission has a draft report that says in just the next 6 years, energy use in the state is going to go up by 40%. 72% of that is 3 AI data centers. So 3 AI data centers, and we crunch the numbers, will use more energy than 4 million Wisconsin homes. And we don't have 4 million homes in Wisconsin. We have like 2.3 million homes in Wisconsin. So these are 3 places, Port Washington, Beaver Dam, right outside Racine and Mount Pleasant, 3 places that are going to use more energy than all the homes in Wisconsin combined and then some. And so when you start thinking about, well, what are the impacts of that? How does that play out? We're seeing how that plays out with new gas plants being built and proposed, coal power plants, retirements being delayed, diesel generators that are going on these sites as backup that when they get fired up for testing or in a heat wave to kind of take the pressure off of the rest of the energy systems, we're seeing massive amounts of pollution that are possible there. Energy use is responsible for more than 70% of water withdrawals in Wisconsin. So if we're building gas power plants or delaying the retirement of coal power plants, we are expecting major water use associated just with that massive energy use of these AI data center projects. So there's a lot going on, a lot to unpack with these enormous energy users. And I think that's why you're starting to see some of these pauses happening in communities all across the state, because people are starting to realize that these are not typical development projects. These are incredibly different, using a shocking amount of energy, and we need to understand what that means for our state.
I want to get the percentage right. There's going to be at some point, because 2 of them are under construction right now, we're going to have 3 hyperscale AI data centers, and they're going to use almost 3/4 of the energy that Wisconsin has or produces. I don't know, however you want. If Wisconsin uses 100% of the energy Wisconsin uses, these 3 data centers are going to use 73% of that.
That's not exactly correct. So they're seeing a 40% increase in the amount of energy the state uses. So 40% more than we are now, 6 years from now we'll be using. And AI data centers are driving 72% of that increase.
Okay,
So
that
it's
makes
a
sense.
layering on this dramatic, shocking increase in the amount of energy that we're going to need as a state. And if you just look at, we wanted to be able to translate that to people so they would get, instead of just talking about gigawatts all the time, how many homes worth of energy is that? So we use energy for a lot of things in Wisconsin in addition to our homes, but we all kind of get what a home uses. And so to think that we have AI data centers that are using, just three of them, more energy than twice as much energy as all the homes in Wisconsin combined.
Yeah, okay,
Um,
that's a great way to
I,
put it. All the households in Wisconsin combined. Yeah.
yep,
So we're gonna have to
twice as
hook up
much.
like every treadmill and every stationary bike at all the gyms to these data centers to power them. Is that a way? I mean, that's a way we could do clean energy to get these things powered.
Well, I haven't heard it that suggested, the treadmills
I
at the
have
gyms, but
I have lots of ideas. And that's just the energy impact, and we're not
yeah.
doing anything there. So does that energy impact, is that going to, how would that affect our pocketbooks, right? Our electricity bills? Would it affect our pocketbooks?
Well, it definitely can. I think when you think about what an energy utility has to do to meet that demand, it's not just build more power plants, but it's like administrative costs and building out all of this stuff that is happening because again, this is like an unprecedented thing. 6 years is an incredibly short period of time. Again, just for three data centers. We Energies, which is the largest energy utility in the state that has two of those data centers I talked about, is predicting increasing its electricity sales, doubling its electricity sales in just the next 5 years. And so it takes a lot of effort to ensure that none of those costs roll over onto all the other people who, for instance, We Energy serves. The municipalities, the homeowners, the business owners. It's almost impossible to keep some of those costs from being
Yeah.
shouldered by everybody else. But Clean Wisconsin is involved in those cases at the PSC to try to make sure that these very wealthy tech companies shoulder as much of this cost and this risk as possible, because it is a lot of risk if you add a whole bunch of infrastructure to your energy system and then that goes away. Maybe tech companies merge, maybe AI doesn't need this kind of energy anymore, then it's everybody else that's going to be left holding the bag. So that's why it's so important. You might have heard that Oracle, the tech company, is suing Wisconsin because of decisions made that we worked hard to try to get at the Public Service Commission. They feel like some of the financial protections are too burdensome, and Oracle wouldn't be able to meet those financial protections here in Wisconsin. So they're actually suing the state to get rid of those, and we're involved in that lawsuit as well. So there's a lot happening, which I think is why some communities are saying, yep, we do need to pause this, because there's so many things that need to get worked out, and these AI data centers are coming at us so quickly.
Amy Barrio is the communications director at Clean Wisconsin. We're talking about data centers here on the Rick Sullivan Show. We've got to take a break. You're listening to WIZM 92.3 FM, 106.7 FM. We'll be back in a minute. Welcome back to the Rick Sullivan Show here on WIZM 92.3 FM, 106.7 FM. We're talking about the impact of data centers on Wisconsin communities, here with Amy Barrio. She is the comms director at the group called Clean Wisconsin. And we've only hit energy when we talk about some of the initiatives you work on, and how I think all of these initiatives that Clean Wisconsin works on, data centers are going to affect all of them: water, air, climate, land, and health, and money. And we've been talking about the energy part of this. Of what I have two thoughts here. First is, I don't like the idea of a data center company coming in, putting up a data center, and going, we'll produce all our own energy. We're going to have our own infrastructure. Whether that, even if it was solar or anything, I don't know. Solar, maybe it wouldn't be so bad. It wouldn't be so bad. But the idea that they would have their own plant or power source to power their data center, it's not the worst thing. But I think these data centers should be investing in our community. If they're going to use energy, they should be upgrading and investing and utilizing. If they're going to utilize our grid to an extent, I think it should be upgraded through them. If they're gonna, I give this analogy. It's not the greatest analogy, but Amy, I want to borrow your car, and I'm going to drive across the country, and I'll pay for the gas, but I'm going to redline your car. I'm going to drive it as fast as it could possibly go, all the way to cross country and back. And then I'm just going to give you your car as I took it, but I'll have it. I'll have a full tank of gas in it for you. But that's probably going to destroy your car a little bit, and that's what I feel like data centers are going to do to the grid, right, so to speak. They're going to redline the grid because the grid's out of date, and they're going to, start producing more or needing more energy and essentially redlining it, right? Is that a terrible analogy or not really?
Well, I think it's an analogy, but it has more to do with your initial point about maybe um, we're seeing in other parts of the country data centers have a big gas plant right there on site, right?
Yeah, we're going to start a
And
nuclear plant, right? Isn't Google going to turn back on an old nuclear site?
they have, yes, I think there are plans in the works for that, but it's important to understand that those harms are going to still hit you, whether or not it's on the data center site or a mile away. The harms of air pollution, the cost of that. So just one of the gas plants that's being proposed right now to power one of those 3 data centers that we talked about is going to cause more than $1 billion in health damages across the state over its lifetime. And so if you think, well, if a data center just comes with its own gas plant, we don't have to worry about it. Well, you still have to worry about it. And those costs are not being paid by the tech companies. Those costs are being paid by us in terms, missed work days, asthma attacks, heart attack, stroke. These are the kinds of things that burning methane gas in our communities causes. Diesel burning, you probably saw we had a heat wave on the East Coast. There are a lot of data centers, AI data centers already operating there. And so the federal government actually ordered the data centers to move totally to their backup power because the grid was strained. So they burn diesel for a week. You don't want to be near that. You don't want to be anywhere near, 250 industrial scale diesel generators operating 24 hours a day. So
Yeah,
when we think about,
as they tell us to turn our thermostats down and don't
yeah,
use as much energy, they tell the data centers, turn your diesel generators on because
that's right.
the grid
So
is strained.
there needs to be more planning here in Wisconsin, certainly, about what is going on. What are we going to do if we have a huge increase in energy demand and it's hot? Can we even handle that? Who's going to pay for all this? Who's going to pay for the health costs of all this? And then what is the true footprint of all this? Our calculations show that just 2 of those data centers, if they're powered by gas, will use as much water as the city of Green Bay. So
Okay, just before we get to water,
Okay, water.
if we're already turning our air conditioners down because it's hot out, like, isn't a data center just going to destroy that 24/7 all year?
I mean, we have to think about that. Should everyone else have to kind of cut back and conserve, and not these tech companies? That again is part of that. The cases that we're intervening in at the Public Service Commission is requiring or making available ways for data centers just to reduce their demand when everybody else needs it. And that's what we're talking about. Like, our energy systems should be shared. This should be public benefit for all of us, not just a few. And those harms, again, if they're bringing in their own energy, if they're burning their own fossil fuels right there on the site, those harms are going to be shared by everybody.
Okay, I hear a lot of different things about water. One is they're not going to consume any water. The second is they're going to consume millions of gallons of water. I don't think that the amount of water it uses is anywhere compared to like Foxconn or anything like that. The idea of the initial Foxconn plant, but also that they might be polluting the water. I think Charlie Barron's, the comedian, is going around the state kind of talking about this. This is kind of a passion project for him to try to save the water, I think, is the aspect that he's focusing on, and jobs.
Yeah.
But there's people that live by these data centers that apparently where their water is polluted. And I don't know if I don't know if it's the data center's fault or if it's coincidence. But yeah, what are the impacts on the water system when it comes to these things?
Yeah, I think data centers are tech companies rather are real quick to try to point out how little water they're using on their campuses because they don't want to talk about how much water they're using off their campuses from all the power plants, especially if it's nuclear, uses a huge amount of water. So what their true water footprint is, which is quite large because they need all that power, and power uses water. On the campus, there's a lot of talk about these closed loop cooling systems, which use less water than the way data centers maybe 4 or 5 years ago used to be cooled. But we have no transparency into what chemicals are in those systems. How are they disposed of? Is it through the sanitary sewer system? If so, that goes right to our lakes and rivers. You know, I think that's the kind of thing where, again, if we have a statewide kind of pause on all this, we can demand to know, how much water are you using during the hottest, driest days of the year when our water systems are the most stressed? What kind of chemicals are on site, and how are you going to dispose of those chemicals? These are questions that communities just deserve to know, but nobody knows those before these approvals happen.
Yeah. Okay. So what's the next dilemma? The water one's pretty, that one's pretty easy to understand. How about land? Like, I'm just going with your initiatives here, just
Yeah.
going down the list. The land, the amount of land. So Republicans always like to argue that we can't put up like giant solar arrays because it's going to use all this farmland. But I never hear that argument when it's a giant data center. So are data centers using all that much land?
Well, and I want to really draw a comparison there, right? So when you have a solar project or a wind project, that land stays in the farming family. And we know we are losing our family farms really, really quickly. So the land stays in the farming family. There's a lease. There's a decommissioning plan that has to be approved by the Public Service Commission. You can farm around wind turbines very easily. You can do all kinds of plantings in and among solar panels. It actually gives the land a chance to rest if it's been really heavily farmed.
Yeah, I heard even
Center,
an argument that climate change, it might not be so prevalent here, but just the idea that we might need solar arrays in farm fields to save the plants from, just being dried out by constant sun all day.
Yeah, and we've done a lot of research around planting pollinator habitats in and among the solar panels, grazing sheep. There's a lot of research going on how to integrate solar into a profitable farm. But data centers, that land is sold, so it's not in the farming family. It's not going to be a family farm anymore. And these buildings are usually about 500,000 square feet apiece. And when you put down a concrete slab and a huge purpose-built building that only can be a data center, that kills the soil. That land will not be farmed again. So that land is lost. And so I think there's sometimes people conflating, solar and wind and data centers, but those things are actually very, very different in terms of their impact on our rural communities. One of them, is a reliable source of income for farming families, and can actually help rebuild soil health, and you can farm among both those kinds. The other one is changing the landscape from rural agricultural to whatever you think a data center is. So industrial, tech, purpose-built. You're not going to use that building for anything else ever again. No decommissioning plan. Nobody knows what happens in 20 years to these enormous purpose-built buildings. So I think, again, a lot of discussion needs to happen around that. And I think that's why you're seeing a lot of pushback, because people are, they're seeing a rural way of life kind of being sucked up one data center at a time. And I want to say these are AI data centers, so the hyperscale, the big ones that are used to power AI is what we're talking about.
Yeah, you mentioned that before we turned the mics on. I said to you, I saw a Milwaukee Journal article. This is a few months ago. I don't know how fast these things go up, but there were like 45 to 50 data centers in Wisconsin, and you told me that there's a couple of different categories of data centers. So if you want to explain that real quick.
Yeah, so we've had data centers for a long time. I mean, we've been using data since we've had cell phones and computers and the internet, and all of our phones are stored in the cloud. That's all data. But AI uses an enormous amount of energy and has an enormous amount of calculations behind it on a scale, again, that we've never really seen before. So these are AI hyperscale data centers. They are incredibly large, unlike any kind of projects we've seen in the past. So it's important to kind of understand that there is a huge difference between, it's kind of like having your little, for your car analogy, your little Hot Wheels car that you played with when you were a kid, and then a giant 18-wheeler in real life, right? They're similar, but they are different.
Yeah, and at this point, there's three in construction. There's one already running, and then you told me there's 15 more, but we don't exactly know the scale of those 15 more on the docket, right?
So Microsoft has the one that they just kind of started up in Mount Pleasant last month, and then they have kind of another large AI data center nearby that's, I believe, maybe starting to be under construction. But then they've got plans for 15 more data centers in that area, and it's unclear how big those are, if they are all hyperscale, or if some of them are, or how these campuses are going to kind of be connected in some way. Again, the tech companies are real great about talking about things in a vague way, but until we know how much energy they're going to use and exactly how big they are, we don't really know what kind of data center they are.
We're speaking with Amy Barrio. She's the comms director at Clean Wisconsin. All right. So next thing, I'm going to stick with pollution a little bit. Not so much air pollution, but noise pollution. Are these things loud if I live near them, or are they not? We could just move on if they're not loud. If I don't know how close to anyone lives by these things, but I've seen some videos where some of these people live right next to these data centers, and I can't imagine that they're not quiet.
Yeah, I think that they are, but again, it's hard to say, because this technology kind of evolves, and so tech companies may be doing a better job of insulating, or may have better setbacks so that there aren't people right on top of them like there are in some other states. And if Wisconsin is looking to do a thing about AI data centers, our lawmakers and whoever is the next governor, some of these things are things worth thinking about. Does there need to be a certain requirement about noise pollution? I think the problem is we don't have any knowledge, really. We don't know what's being built. We don't have great transparency, and we don't have any kind of regulation. So these are unregulated AI data centers. They are just coming, and we don't have any way to get a handle on anything coming out of there. The pollution, the energy use, all those things. It's really, things are moving faster than accountability can really happen.
What's the benefit? If I'm a farmer and my farm's kind of going under and I own, 200 acres, I would say the benefit is, to me, I could sell this thing to, a big tech company and get millions of dollars, probably millions of dollars over the cost of what my land would actually be. They could probably hold out. They probably ruin some property values in the area doing that. But what is the value to a community, to the state, data centers? Are they selling anything that makes it, all our communities, all our municipalities and cities are kind of strapped for cash when the state, withholds $2.5 billion in budget surplus that could be distributed among through the state, through public schools or just to municipalities. Are data centers selling anything that we're starved communities are like, yeah, that couple million or billion, I don't know how much money, a couple $1 million might help them?
I mean, I'm sure communities are looking at it that way. Communities have been starved for cash here for a while through no fault of their own, right? And they're just trying to survive. And I think that's what makes Wisconsin so vulnerable to these tech companies coming in. Communities are just trying to do what's right, or at least were. Now I think they are starting to see that maybe the benefits aren't outweighing the cost to their community, because maybe they didn't fully understand what the costs were going to be. I think certainly the folks who are benefiting are our energy companies. They make a 12% profit on everything they build, and that comes right out of your, energy bill if nothing changes. So they make a 12% profit on all those power plants and anything that needs to produce energy. So they are seeing dollar signs with these tech companies and these AI data centers. They are actively working to lure tech companies here to Wisconsin. They're putting together the land parcels. They're putting together the deals. And so when you think about who's winning and who's losing in this data center moment, in a lot of ways, power company investors, shareholders, those folks are going to be winning, because it's going to be, again, doubling electricity sales in 5 years for our biggest utilities. Somebody's making an enormous profit off of that.
But do you know how many of those? Do you know how many
Go
of those
ahead.
companies are in Wisconsin? It's like We Energy and Dairyland. Are those right? Is that the some examples of those?
That's what I'm talking about, your energy utilities. So
Yep.
Dairyland is a cooperative. We Energies is a for-profit company. Alliant Energy, for-profit energy company. So these are the people tasked with caring for our shared energy infrastructure, but they also are guaranteed. So it's a guaranteed called rate of return for everything that they build or invest in this infrastructure. Um, and so 12% profit is pretty hefty when you're investing $1 billion in this gas plant, $1 billion in that gas plant. We've
Why
got
is it 12%?
five gas plant proposals right now, so
Why,
it's a
why is it
good
12%? Like
chunk.
who's given that number? Like are they is that like their internal they need this profit margin?
Yeah, so that is at the Public Service Commission of Wisconsin. So our utilities, our water utilities, which are owned by municipalities, they get a rate of return when they invest in water mains and things like that. That goes to the cities because they're typically owned by cities or municipalities. On the energy side, they get a rate of return. That's a guaranteed amount of money back for the money that they spend on infrastructure. So I believe it's 12.5% typically. But then when you hear about like, you know, your energy utility has a rate case before the Public Service Commission, that's where that is determined. And typically it's in the 12 to 12.5% range.
Okay, and then we got to rely on the PSC, the Public Service Commission, to kind of like save the residents of Wisconsin in some respect.
Well, I think more than anything, we need to rely on our lawmakers, right? Because the Public Service Commission has a suite of responsibilities that it has, and unless it's given more or less power by the legislature and the governor through laws, then it's not going to do something that's not allowed to do legally. That's why, and this is going to get a little nichey, so I'm sorry, but we don't have any full-scale plan for our energy resources. It's called an integrated resource plan. We used to have one. It was taken away 10 years ago or so. And that makes things really difficult when these big energy users come in because we don't have any transparency over what our energy utilities are doing, our power companies. We don't know what's coming where. We don't know what's getting built. And so we badly need that back because without that, the Public Service Commission just does not have a lot of power to help us plan as we face this mountain of energy increase unlike anything we've ever seen before.
So when we're talking to candidates for state assembly, state senate, and Wisconsin governor, we should ask them what the integrated resource plan, what they're,
We should
do
be
they
like,
have
what are
any
you
idea?
doing? What are you doing
Should
about
we
that?
bring back the integrated resource plan candidate? Whoever.
Yeah, I mean, I think it doesn't sound like that exciting, but if you don't have it, then there's just no way to deal with these AI data centers coming in and each one uses as much energy as 1 million Wisconsin homes. How do you deal with that if you don't have a plan for how all of our energy resources work together? It's incredibly damaging, and we're starting to see that damage now in terms of 5 really expensive new gas plants that could be built here in the next few years.
All right. Before I let you go, you gave me a stat at the beginning of the show, 73%. And maybe you could throw that stat out there. Any other like stats that come to mind that are just a little bit mind boggling when it comes to data centers in Wisconsin or just in general?
I mean, just to think about that one data center in Mount Pleasant, it's built, it's starting to operate, it's going to use as much energy as 1 million Wisconsin homes. So that one spot in Mount Pleasant is going to be like the hugest city, in Wisconsin or among the hugest cities. And nobody lives there. It's just, it's an AI data center. It's just making AI tools. And I think we need to understand that it took us 100 years to make the energy system that we have now. And now we're going to remake that in just the next decade or so, just for a handful of these AI data centers. I mean, that's where we're headed. And it's not just Wisconsin. This is a regional issue. We all rely on our Great Lakes for a water-rich place, but if we start building so much, so many power plants that strain our water resources, that's something we really need to think about here in Wisconsin.
That's Amy Barrio. She is the comms director at Clean Wisconsin. If you want to check out their website and go support it, I think you can go on Facebook and see everything they're doing as well there too, right, Amy?
Yeah. Yep.
All right. I
And we have a
appreciate you.
petition calling for a pause in unchecked AI data center development. It's right there on our homepage at cleanwisconsin.org.
All right. I'll throw that link in the podcast interview. Thank you so much for
Great.
joining me, Amy.
Well, thank you.